The courtroom smelled faintly of polish and paper. My heart pounded as I clutched my worn brown purse, the same one I'd carried for years, through hospitals, through debt offices, through every humiliation life had offered me. Across the aisle, my ex-husband Richard sat beside his new wife, Cassandra. She was everything I once thought I wanted to be: young, tall, radiant, confident. She looked at me and smiled, not kindly, but like someone who had already won. Richard didn't look at me. He couldn't. Maybe because deep down he knew why we were here wasn't just about inheritance or property. It was about something far darker. When the bailiff announced, "All rise," the doors opened and Judge Harmon entered. But then, as he caught sight of me, his face froze. For a brief second, I saw the same flicker of shock I'd seen 20 years ago, back when I was still Detective Laura Hayes, before I'd lost everything. He blinked, straightened, and said only, "Proceed." Cassandra's lawyer rose first. She was young, ambitious, and arrogant. "Your Honor," she said, "my client seeks rightful ownership of the estate left behind by her late father-in-law, Mr. Arthur Hayes. My client's husband, Mr. Richard Hayes, was his only son. However, this woman," she gestured toward me, "illegally occupies the farmhouse and refuses to vacate the property." A few people in the audience murmured. To them, I probably looked pitiful. A middle-aged woman in a faded dress, hair tied back, eyes hollow. They couldn't have known that every corner of that farmhouse was soaked in memory. And in guilt. When my turn came, I stood slowly, feeling the ache in my knees, and placed a thick envelope on the table. "My husband's father left a will," I said quietly. "A will they've tried to erase," the lawyer laughed. "Do you have proof of that claim?" I opened the envelope. Inside was an old photograph, Arthur, Richard, and me, taken 25 years ago in the fields behind the farmhouse. The laughter frozen in that photograph hid a secret the court was about to discover. Flashback, 25 years earlier, Arthur had built that farm with his bare hands. He wasn't rich, but he was proud, and he adored Richard, his only child. I was young then, studying criminal law, and Arthur treated me like the daughter he never had. But Richard, he was reckless, always borrowing money, always chasing schemes. When I found out he'd mortgaged half the farm behind Arthur's back, I begged him to tell his father the truth. Instead, he blamed me for ruining his chances. The night Arthur died, it was raining hard. I found him collapsed in the barn. His last words were, "Promise me you'll protect what's ours. Not for Richard, but for what's right," I promised. And I kept that promise. For 20 years, I paid off the debt, repaired the farmhouse, and raised our son Ethan alone after Richard left me for Cassandra. I never asked for anything. Until now. Back to the courtroom, Judge Harmon leaned forward. "Mrs. Hayes, you claim a will exists?" "Yes," I replied. "But not the kind they expect." I reached into the envelope again and pulled out a small, time-worn cassette tape. Gasps filled the room. "This was recorded by Arthur Hayes 2 weeks before he passed," I said. "He asked me to keep it safe. I didn't think I'd ever need to play it, but—" I looked straight at Richard. "Apparently, I do." The judge nodded to the clerk. The tape was placed into an old player. Arthur's raspy voice filled the courtroom. "If my son ever stands in front of a judge over this land, it belongs not to him, but to Laura. She's the only one who truly worked for it. My son, God forgive him, doesn't know the meaning of sacrifice." The words hung in the air like thunder. Richard's face went white. Cassandra's perfect posture crumbled. Her painted smile disappeared. "Objection," her lawyer shouted. "This evidence can't be authenticated." But Judge Harmon raised a hand. "I recognize that voice," he said slowly. "Arthur Hayes was a man of integrity. Unless proven otherwise, this will stand." Cassandra turned to Richard, hissing, "You told me you destroyed everything." The courtroom erupted in whispers. Another flashback. The betrayal. I remembered the night Richard and Cassandra first met, at the firm's New Year gala. I'd been exhausted from long hours at work, defending a case of a young man wrongly accused. Richard danced with Cassandra under the lights, and I told myself it was innocent. But when I came home one evening to find the closet half empty, I understood. He left with nothing but his clothes and my heart in pieces. Months later, I heard they were married and expecting. I focused on raising Ethan, on keeping the farm alive. But then, after Arthur's death, letters started coming from lawyers, claiming the land was community property. I knew Richard was behind it. I ignored them until the eviction notice came. That's when I knew it was time to step out of the shadows and fight, not as a wife, but as a woman who once swore an oath to protect justice. The truth unfolds. In the courtroom, the judge's gaze shifted to Cassandra. "Mrs. Hayes," he said calmly, "did you know your husband attempted to forge documents regarding this property?" Her face turned crimson. I don't know what you're talking about, but I did. Because a week earlier, I had visited my former partner from my detective days, Daniel Ortiz. He found a trail of emails between Richard and a document forger. When I placed the printed emails on the table, the judge didn't even need to read them all. The evidence spoke louder than I ever could. Richard dropped his head into his hands. "Laura, please." I was desperate. I looked at him, and for a moment I saw the boy I once loved, the man who had promised to build a future with me. But then I remembered all the nights I sat alone, all the years Ethan asked, "Where's Dad?" And I had no answer. I was desperate too, I said softly. But I never became a liar. The verdict, the judge cleared his throat. This court finds that the property in question is the sole possession of Mrs. Laura Hayes. Furthermore, the forged documents presented by Mr. Richard Hayes will be submitted for criminal review. The sound of the gavel echoed like thunder. Cassandra stood abruptly, her voice shaking. "You'll regret this. We'll appeal." But no one listened. I picked up my purse, turned to leave, and saw Ethan waiting by the door. He was tall now, taller than his father, and the pride in his eyes was the only victory I needed. Epilogue. That night I stood on the farmhouse porch, the sun setting over the fields. The wind smelled like rain and freedom. Ethan came up beside me. "Mom," he said quietly, "was it worth it?" I looked at the land stretching before us, the soil Arthur had bled for, the home I had fought to protect. "Yes," I whispered, "because justice isn't about revenge. It's about peace." He smiled, and for the first time in years I felt that peace. The house creaked behind us, old but alive, just like me. Sometimes the past comes back not to haunt us, but to remind us who we really are.